What's a woman to do? I mean, think of it. There's so many voices today telling you, you need to do this, you need to be that, you need to work here, you need to raise a family here, you've got to be this, you've got to be that, you need to... What's a woman to do? What does God want you to do? Ladies, I'm glad you tuned in, because that's what we're going to ask and answer today on Living on the Edge. Stay with me. Well, it's been great to be together, and we're going to talk about what's a woman to do. Very brief review. Over here is our invisible house, right? And the foundation in our invisible house is the marriage covenant. It's a covenant. It's not a contract. We looked at wall number 1, at what's a man to be, and a man needs to step up. And we took at wall number 2, and what's a woman to be? A woman needs to step in. And then in our last session, we said, well, what's a man to do? We talked about being the priest of his family and being the leader and being the person who gives oversight to the family. And then we're going to look now at, so what's a woman to do? And as we kind of finish up this part, then we're going to ask the Spirit of God and the grace of God to put a roof over that, because we can't do it on our own. I do have to warn you, though, that this message actually comes with an official warning label. You know, like when you get a prescription and it has a little thing that says, you know, do not take this medicine while driving or running heavy equipment. I don't know anybody who goes to bed and runs heavy equipment anyway, but the warning is on the label. So let me give you, I need to read this warning. This is from God. Warning, contents may be dangerous. The message you're about to hear may be hazardous to your emotional equilibrium. It may call into question assumptions and preconceived ideas you have about womanhood, marriage, and motherhood. Though ancient in its origin and tested successfully for centuries, these concepts may sound strange, counterculture, or even bizarre to the ears of 21st century men and women. The implications of this message on your life and family could be drastic, even disturbing. If implied en masse by those who claim allegiance to Jesus Christ, it could be revolutionary. What's a woman to do? A wife's number 1 priority is to support, affirm, and empower her husband to fulfill his God-given calling both within and outside the church. Your number 1 priority, now this sounds kind of narrow. Actually, a woman's number 1 priority is to help your husband. In fact, in Genesis 2:28, God says it's not good for man to be alone. And so he creates woman. And then when he brings the woman to the man, he talks about a suitable helpmate. Now, we don't like the word helpmate because that sounds like it's inferior, and it's not. The exact same word is used of God in the Psalms of being the helpmate of his people. In fact, suitable has the idea of a corresponding part. It's a picture of God has made man, and man has these deficiencies, and in and of himself, he's not able to do what God wants him to do, and so he creates woman so that together, as a team, they have the ability to fulfill God's design on the earth. And what we've been talking about is there's certain roles for the man and certain roles for the woman that are complementary, that are impossible apart from mutual submission to Christ. And so now he says to the woman, your number 1 role then is to be the champion, the teammate, and the best friend. I think that's the best picture of a wife. There's no sense of inferiority. There's no sense of less than important. Success in every organization requires someone who champions the cause, the values, the course, and the commitment. That's what God says is a woman's number 1 priority. The practical outworking. Let me give you about 5 specific things, ladies. How do you do that? How do you do that in this relationship? In the words of Beth Midler, how do you become the wind beneath your husband's wings? You know, as I meet men, all kind of men, of all kind of backgrounds, and actually from countries all around the world, when you find a man that God's hand is on him, that significant things have happened, and there's a family intact, in any honest moment, he'll tell you, I'll just tell you, my wife is the glue, my wife is the wind. What the energy I get, the commitment we have, the relationship we have explains about 80% of any of the quote success that people see. It's interesting that happens, when someone dies, they play that song. If someone gets a big award, they play that song. Sometimes that is a role that's more behind the scenes, but every bit as important. In fact, maybe more important. So how do you do it? Number one, make time with God your number one priority. The most spiritually, emotionally, and physically demanding job, I think, is running, managing a home that creates a transformational environment. I think the role of a husband to love his wife the way Christ loved the church is impossible and difficult and requires grace. I think the role, the skill set, the ability to do what a woman needs to do requires probably more than any other specific role that I know of. In fact, I've kind of done a little journey of, research and, left brain and right brain and how men are made and women are made and the physiological differences and emotional intelligence. I'll just tell you, ladies, God gave you more equipment than we have. They really do. Men do tend to be more focused and for the role and the job that they have them, but you multitask. Some guys can multitask pretty well, but they're amateurs compared to you. Most men are either fairly right-brained or fairly left-brained. Most women have higher capacity in both. Because you have to be able to read what's going on in a child over here, have 4 or 5 projects going over here, you're a counselor here, a nurse here, you got to be a strategic planner over here. What a woman has to do to make everybody's life work in a way that God so desires, and what it requires emotionally, what it requires spiritually, what it requires in physical energy, what it requires in wisdom. I mean, you can't do it apart from getting the supernatural strength and wisdom from God. And so I want to encourage you, that supernatural resource, as we said earlier, you can't impart what you don't possess. And it's so hard because it's counterintuitive. How do you take time for you? How do you take time to be with God and get resourced when there's kids and demand and for many work as well? And all I can tell you is, if you don't, you'll give out from the fumes, and the person that'll cave in eventually is you. And if you don't have it to give to your family, they don't get it. I watched, we had 4 kids, so my wife's life was not boring. And, we had them when they were small, and if you've ever, we ended up pastoring in very small churches, medium-sized churches, and very large churches. The demand on a pastor's wife is pretty incredible. But my kids grew up where if you had to get up early, how little boys and little girls are, like, 5 or 5:30 in the morning to get up and go to the bathroom, they would glance in and see, there's their mom, either on her knees praying or sitting in the corner in the couch with an open Bible and a cup of coffee with a lamp in the corner. What my kids learned was, Mom made her time with God a priority. And she will be very honest during some of those times with kids and waking up in the middle of the night, and when they're smaller, there's times where it was 5 minutes here, it was 7 minutes here, it was only while they had a nap, and she was exhausted. But I've watched until it goes in, it can't come out. And can I say this nicely? Some men are really hard to live with. I'm chief among them. I have a pretty decent self-awareness. I would hate to live with me personally. My idiosyncrasies, my wife, if you ask her, my idiosyncrasies and how I'm wired up, it just takes incredible patience. You know what it takes? It takes God's grace in her heart to see me through the lens of Christ and my potential instead of how I make her crazy. Second thing is pray for him regularly. A woman's power and influence in the home is often as much informal as formal. It's more indirect than direct. And your biggest challenges are things you can't control. How much can you control about what's happening at your husband's work? How much can you control when your teenager goes out with 3 other teenagers and there's that window of time where they say, hey, do you want to smoke a little weed? Or do you want to go home and do this here? Or some boy or some girl says, see, the biggest, most important things in your life as a woman, you have so little control of. But Proverbs 21:1 says, the king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it whatever way he wishes. When you become a woman who prays, you pray for him, you pray for your kids, you say, oh God, I can't get through to him. He's pretty hard-headed, but you get through to him. And I think there's been multiple times where, Teresa will see something in my life and I've watched her pray to God, and then I'll read a book here or talk with a friend here, and I'll come in and say, hey, God showed me, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm not quite sure, but I almost see a little smile like, God and I have been talking about that for about 3 or 4 months. We were kind of wondering when you were going to get on the page. But you make time with God and you pray for him regularly, and then you plan for him daily. And even this sounds so focused, but if your first priority of ministry to your husband isn't working, it doesn't work with the kids or work or anything else. And planning for him daily. Life doesn't just happen. Demands on a woman's time and energy are overwhelming, spontaneous, and unrelenting. Planned attention, love, communication, and nurture is a necessity if your relationship's going to work. I remember reading a book by a lady who talked about planning for her husband. And she had the habit of planning one kind deed every day. She just planned in what's one kind thing. It might be a note, it might be a call, it might be but something special. Planning in special dinners, planning in meals together, planning when you're going to put the kids to bed so you actually can have some time to communicate and to talk. But you plan in daily, how are we going to make this a good relationship? I watch especially young parents, they have kind of young kids, and you can kind of just unconsciously, the whole world starts, I've got all grown kids and they all have young kids, and some of them I watched early on when they weren't very smart. Just the kids, whatever they did, the whole world revolved around them. And if the kids didn't want to go to bed till 8:30 or 9 or 10, they did. And then they get up at, they wake up like they do, 5:30, 6, and the parents had no life at all. You know what? Either you train your kids or they train you. And you know what? When you tell them you're going to bed at 7 o'clock if they're 3 years old, or 6:30 or 8, whatever it is, they'll whine and cry and I need a glass of water. You know what? You just do it for about 2 weeks, they'll get it. But every couple needs, a window of time, a couple hours at evening where you can be like, remember, we're husband and wife. And it's not a willful thing, but I just watch exhausted couples have no time for one another. And ladies, I love your husband. I try to be pretty loving and strong. If you wait on him to plan this stuff, you're going to be waiting a long time. You are the chief operating officer. If it happens in the home, you make it happen. Now, guys, you need to lead, and I'm encouraging you to help out here. But plan daily. Fourth, prepare for him daily. What a woman does initially to attract a man is often lost in the shuffle of work, kids, supper, and fatigue. The fact is, mentally, emotionally, physically preparing for the relational connectedness, communication, and romance in your marriage is critical. And again, there's a very clearly defined process that happens in marriages. Remember when you all were dating? For some of you got to go back quite a while, and for others, I heard been married 1.5 years, not so long. But when you were dating, like when he came over and you were going to fix a nice dinner, you didn't pull something that you heated up, show up in curlers without makeup and say, how do you like these sweats? I mean, you were thinking, I'm going to look sharp. And I don't mean there's a 7-course meal, but there was a real commitment to be on. And what happens is, especially, and I'm just going to tell you up front, some of the things I'm recommending, some of your eyes are already telling me. You're looking at me like, buddy, when in the world would I do that? I get up at 5:30 as it is. I have 2 kids to get off. He leaves and I go to work. I come home. She comes home. I mean, our healthy meals are like the new diet at McDonald's. And then we both come together and if I'm, say, I want you to stop right now. Do you want what that's going to produce in the next 10 or 15 years? And is whatever amount of money that brings in worth what you're sacrificing? And you know what's wild? I meet Christians all the time. You don't even have a life. You don't have a life. You don't have time for you. You don't have time for each other. You don't have time for kids, but there's something in the air, there's something in the world called the world system, that there's this urgency and this push that your kids need to be involved in all of this, and you have to have this and you have to have that, and it's unconscious. And I'm going to ask you to think, and this could be disturbing, where you say, wait a minute, I got to question the paradigm. Do we need to have 2 incomes? Do we need to have 2 cars? Do we need to own a home? You say, whoa, wait a second. See, there's unconscious assumptions we've made that have our lives on speed dial that leaves no time for one another, that is producing exactly what we're getting. And what it will take to bring about change is not tweaking your family. You'll push the pause button and step back and look at the box top and say, you know what? We'd have to make a radical change. I've had couples tell me, you know what we realized? We can't do this at this season with 3 small kids and both of us working. I have to come home for this season of time while they're little. That means we have 1 income. That means we need to sell our house. That means where I used to live in California, where a decent garage that's about 400 square feet is $200,000 and a decent house is like $900,000. We can't live here. So, you understand? You're going to wake up one day in about 15 years, if you have 3 or 4-year-olds, and about 10 years if you have 12-year-olds, and you will have invested and made assumptions about what to do with your time and your energy and your marriage and your family, and you will either have kids that love you and that are connected, and a marriage that you created margin and where things really made a difference, or you'll keep going at this insane pace thinking you had to do it, that there was an invisible gun to your head, and you'll just realize, wow, how did we drift apart? And why don't our kids walk with God? And you sow, and then you reap. But you never reap in the same season that you sow. And so men, you have this huge responsibility to say, I'm going to provide vision and direction and accountability. And then you have this role as a woman to be the chief operating officer of your home, to meet the deepest needs in your husband's life and your children's life and the next generation, and then figure in these seasons when and how do we need more income or expressing or exercising my gift outside the home. When should that happen and why? But it's not one of your top 2 priorities. And you have lived in a world where you are actually made fun of to think that being a mother and a wife is a holy calling. Well, you go visit all those ladies who think it's not a holy calling and just peer into the life of their 2nd or 3rd marriage and their disengagement with their kids and the addictions their kids have, and you ask yourself, do you want to be politically correct or powerfully engaged? And only God can answer that. But when I read that warning, I wasn't kidding. And so a woman makes time with God her priority. You pray for your husband. You plan for him. You prepare for him daily. And then finally, you protect your time with him. Your husband, now ladies, think of this. Your husband is the #1 human relationship on this earth that you're responsible for. Not your kids. Your husband. The greatest thing you do with your kids is have the kind of relationship with your husband that your kids go, oh, that's what it looks like. I feel safe. I feel secure. The happier he is, the better he leads. The more loved he is. And no one can love him the way you love him. No one can give. No amount of ESPN or Sports Center or a bigger house or a remodeled kitchen or a nicer car or great vacations can deliver what you can bring and what he can bring to you. At the end of the day, what we've done is we've replaced stuff and status for substance and relationships. And we've unconsciously believed that better and nicer and bigger is going to deliver, quote, the American dream, the real life. And so we've created insane lives with misplaced priorities where we don't even have, we want to love each other, but we don't even have the time to love each other. I was very, very blessed, my wife. We've had our share of really difficult, painful things, but she did some things really well. She really made me her number one priority. She planned for me. When I came home, one is she was a general. We eat at 5:30. All those people and all those needs at the church? Great. We love them all. Before 5:30 or occasionally after 5:30, but we're having dinner and I'm fixing it. Like an actual food. And you will be around the table. And occasional sport activity here and there, but hey, this is what matters. This is the glue. I run this house. And when I got home, I met a wife who had fresh makeup on, who understood within about 10 to 15 to 20 minutes when I was going to get home. And she looked good when I dated her, and she looked good the first 5 years, and she's looked good the next 20 years, and she looks good now. And she has worked at not only her spiritual and emotional development, but her physical appearance, knowing how I'm wired. And I'll tell you what, it's awesome. And she does that because she loves me. She does that because despite how maternal and nurturing she is, and to be honest, our biggest conflicts is when she slides into making those kids number one, it ticks me off. Right, guys? One of the most difficult times, a quick aside here, one of the most difficult times in a man's life is when that first kid comes. By the second one, at least you know what's happening. And you're excited, this is part of you, this is part of me, and she holds that baby and you're really excited, and she's out of commission for a month and you're not going to get much attention, but it's like after a month and everything's baby, 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 the baby's sleeping, the baby this, the baby that's 21 inches, now we're going to go while you're at the doctor, and the baby, does look good in this color and that color, and all the girls, baby, 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 baby. And after about a month, I know these are private moments, you're driving in your car to work. And you don't even say this out loud unless you have a really, really close friend where it's safe. And down deep you're thinking, I'm really for this baby. It's half me. This is a good thing. But when did I get demoted to number 5? It's like I was the star running back and I'm not even on the depth chart now. And and down deep it's like, hey, what about me? The big baby, And then the months go by and it's 4 or 5 and 6 months and you're thinking, hey, I think this baby's got it, it can go for a bottle now and then. Can we get away? And if you're not careful, no, the baby's not ready. Baby's not ready. Well, okay, it's almost a year. I think your mom could go, no, the baby's not ready. Baby's not ready. And there's some women that, the guy's going, she's 16 years old. Can we go away for a weekend? She'll be okay. And when that baby comes, a woman's greatest temptation is to lock in and feel like her life, energy, and priority becomes the children or the child. And during that time, a man feels rejected. Some of the most common time for affairs are in the first 3 to 5 months after a newborn child. The second most common time for affairs and divorce is when you've been married between 20 and 25 years. Because what happens is we're compensators, okay? If I'm not getting strokes from my wife like I want, I'm a man, I'll go find them. So, all the people that get dressed up and look real nice at my office, they're going to treat me really nice. And if I do well at my work, they tell me I'm really wonderful and pat me on the back. And so all of a sudden I start working more and more and more, and she gets more and more with babies, and we figure out how to make it work. And then about 20 years later, her job gets done, and those kids are out, and I'm on my job, and you have 2 strangers who say, let's see, You love the kids, and I loved work, and we got nothing in common. The primary responsibility for a woman in God's design for the home is to nurture. And the first priority of nurturing is her husband. As I talk with women, having pastored now for about 30 years and listening to what I just taught here, I know what you're thinking. When am I going to do that? When am I going to make God a priority? My life is frazzled. I'm running. I'm working. I've got kids. I've got pressures. I'm involved in ministry. Okay, you ready? Ladies, time out. Just time out for just a second. Will you please listen? There are many urgent, pressing things in your life. And a year from now, there'll be many urgent, pressing things in your life. Are you ready? 10 years from now, there'll be many urgent, pressing things in your life. What I talked about and what I've learned primarily from my wife and Scripture is there are things that are very, very important, but they're not very urgent. Praying, getting with other women, doing this study with them, asking God what He wants to do in you before He works through you, taking time for you, making hard decisions about what really matters and what are just pressures that you feel. Can I encourage you to do something important that's not urgent? Go to the website and listen to this program and find 2 or 3 other women, if you can't get a group of couples, and say, you know something? I need this. I'm going to block off time for me and a few other women to become the woman God wants me to be. And when you take care of the important, they'll be less urgent, and you will like the woman that you look in the mirror at, and your children will like the mom that they get, and your husband will be thrilled with the wife that emerges. Do what really matters. Pay the price. Put first things first.